Is it possible to build a travel business without a personal network of potential clients and solely relying on Google, blogging, and SEO? Welcome to the Masters in Travel podcast. I'm Whitney, owner of Undiscovered Sunsets and The Hive. This is a podcast for us, by us, where we have deep conversations with honest answers. Nothing is off limits here. Here with me today to discuss their approach in building their travel businesses, specifically not relying on social media, a personal network, or repeat referral business, but rather by utilizing and mastering Google reviews, blogging, SEO searches, etc., are two fabulous advisors. Lee Friedman is the owner of Mango Tree Travel. Lee, it's so good to have you.
Thanks, Whitney.
And Denise Kubica is the owner of Mindset Travel. Denise, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So building a book of business from scratch is a big feat, no matter how you do it. Most commonly, I hear about advisors who are either surrounded by a network of potential clients, or they utilize social media to get the word out, or in your cases, leaning into Google search, SEO, blogging, these types of things to make your mark and attract clients. I think until now, a lot of our conversations on the podcast have centered around repeat and referral networks or advisors who already had a personal network. And that's not a negative thing. I think that is what we hear about a lot in the industry. And actually, if I think back, when I was interviewing with host agencies at the very beginning, that was the number one question they asked me is, do you have a personal network? Who are your clients going to be? And if I didn't have the right answer to that, they did not accept me, or like conversations did not continue along the path of me potentially joining their host agency. I actually had some host agencies say, like, if you don't have a network, then we're not interested. And I remember feeling like that really doesn't feel very fair, but what did I know? So I'm very, very excited for our conversation today. So it is really fascinating to me the way that you guys have built your businesses, because I did start with a personal network. I have grown with repeat referral. And so the world that you are both in and the world that you are navigating is something that I know about like tangentially, but I don't actually know like what it looks and feels like to do this from the very beginning. So Lee, we can start with you. I'm really curious, when starting your business, how did you navigate just the possibilities of like, here are all the ways someone could build a business, and ultimately decide that Google searches, writing blogs, tapping into SEO, how did you decide that this was the strategy that was most aligned for you and your business? And like, ultimately, this is how you started.
Yeah. So when I started Mango Tree Travel, I was not necessarily thinking about becoming an advisor. My initial business idea, the sort of spark that got me going, was that I wanted to create a better resource for parents like me who enjoyed planning trips themselves, but were getting more and more frustrated with that process and with the information overwhelm that can be out there when you are using websites like Expedia or Booking or any of those types of websites. And I had gotten increasingly frustrated with the planning of travel after I had my second child and after COVID. And I thought there just has to be a better resource out there, and sort of had that spark where I thought, well, why can't I build it? I could build it. And the timing in my life happened to work out that I had the energy and the time to think about doing that at that moment. And so I went into the process thinking about building a website that was a resource for parents. And I had no idea how I was going to monetize it. I had no idea really what the business strategy was. I was not an entrepreneur. I had the idea and I thought, I'm going to start the idea. And so I started learning about website design and envisioning what I wanted it to look like, and happened to have a close friend who does SEO and online marketing for a living. And so some of the first pieces of advice that I got from him were about how do you get people to a website? And it's you learn SEO, you put out content. And so I kind of went down that path. And then as part of building the website, I later put on, his brother is a luxury travel advisor. So that
you've got a really, so we're not talking about our personal networks today, but you do have a really interesting like circle of folks in your life.
It's funny. It's my husband's best friend does online SEO marketing, and his brother is a luxury travel advisor. And so when I got the idea, those were the first two calls I had. So like, lucky for me, I had those people to speak to. So they at least kind of gave me in that first week an idea of like the universe of people who are out there. But I went much further down the SEO website design, and then sort of just added onto the website, like, let me plan your trip.
So
And
even
then,
with a
yeah,
luxury travel advisor, like in your circle, that still wasn't where your mind was.
no, it
Oh, that's
didn't.
incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't. And he does like very high end travel for like clients with private jets. Like so
Okay.
in my head, I'm not even sure I realized that there was like this bigger world of travel
Gotcha.
at that moment. That wasn't obvious to me. It took
Okay.
me probably almost a year to realize that like there was this whole world that you guys were living in.
Like people
But I
do still travel commercially.
that's right. That's so right. Um, that's right. But I spent a full, from like the inception of the idea through the launch of the website, it was about a full year of focusing on the website as a product and resource for parents, and learning web design and learning SEO and learning all that. And then the trip planning inquiries started to roll in. I had the sort of like, let me book your trip, let me plan your trip for you. And as those started to roll in, I thought, oh, this is like something else that's happening over here. And then it kind of went from there. And so then the travel advisor
Okay.
piece came on almost as not an afterthought by any means, because I went into the business thinking I want to have a family travel business. But the travel advisor
Did she
piece was
freeze?
not the
She
start.
froze.
Oh no.
Oh, you froze for just like a
Am
split
I back?
second.
Okay.
Yes,
That's
you're
right.
back.
All
So
right.
you were
Yeah.
saying we just lost like the last 5 seconds.
Okay. So yeah, so the travel advisor piece for me, I didn't create a website and learn SEO to market my travel advisor business. I started a website, and the travel advisor business kind of revealed itself as a
Interesting.
pathway that I could take.
So when you put "Let me design your trip" on the website, what were you thinking was going to happen?
And I didn't know what a DMC was, right? Like, I did this for a year. I didn't know what that was. I still don't.
Literally, I think every travel advisor, there's like one thing that like I didn't know what a host agency
Yeah.
was. You know. So I think we all have this like thing. There's like we didn't understand what this was, and that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
So were you envisioning, like when you said "Let me plan your trip"? Were you envisioning that it was like a parent who would reach out and you would just be like, "Yeah, go here, here, and here"? Like,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that kind of what you had in
Yep.
mind?
Yep. And I still do a lot of my business as as an advisor is not full itinerary and more like destination matching, which is also partly because I started with the Caribbean. And so a lot of what I do is I help families identify the best islands and resorts for them. So there wasn't always a
But
full itinerary build there, right?
honestly, as a travel advisor, I want to pay you for that because we've had a lot of discussions about how I know absolutely nothing about the Caribbean. And the biggest hurdle when a client asks for it, and it's always like a repeat client that I can't turn away, it's always a situation like this, that it's like, what island? I don't know. Like, I don't.
Not
St.
that,
Lucia, it
I
looks
don't,
pretty.
not that I necessarily want to market myself as the consultant to all other travel advisors for the Caribbean, but I really don't mind getting those emails. Like, I find the logic game so fun. Like, I get an email from someone being like, where should I send them? And I'm like, drop everything. Can I figure it out? And it's like, it's a part of my personality I have to adjust as a business owner. But
I think you should charge for that. And I
all
think that advisors would pay for it, to be
right.
like really honest, just because it's not, especially for advisors like me who are like, I need to know this at, like, to some extent, but it's not where I'm going to invest all my time and resources to become an expert.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather like pay you to like help narrow it down for
Yeah.
me, and then I kind of take it from there. So just keep that in
All
your
right.
back
Well,
pocket.
let's talk offline.
So I feel like every time I see you, there's always like we'll chat
Let's
about
talk
this
offline.
later. Okay. So Denise, I kind of knew Lee's story, but I think I even like discovered some new things here. So how did this journey start for you from the very beginning, and how did you consider all the possibilities of starting a business, growing a business, getting in front of new clients, and how did you decide it's going to be Google? It's going to, it's not going to be a personal network type of thing. How did this come about for you?
So my story is quite different from Lee's in that I launched with the idea that I wanted to be a travel agent. So I was living in a relatively new area for me. I've only been there for a couple of years. So when I was starting to research, like, how do you do this? Google is the first place we go, right? And so as I was trying to think of what do other people in my shoes do who are new to an area, it was an area that was very transient. Everybody grew up, then went away to college, and then would come home to raise families. But it was also growing with people moving in from other parts of the country. So a lot of people were in my shoes going, how do you find, being new to an area, where's the nearest grocery store? How do I find a personal trainer? I'm looking for an interior designer. I need a nanny. Like, the first thing you do, you go to Google and you try to figure it out. You do a search. And so for me, as I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to do it, it just kind of clicked that, well, I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I bet other people are trying to find agents this way. So I just started with some of my own searches and started looking at what other agencies were online, and quite literally what I was interested in doing, I could not easily find in my area or what other agents were doing. So it happened to be a good fit between my interest in FITs and my history in living in Europe, along with my desire to do completely custom and wanting to build that out. Compared to most other people were Caribbean or doing river cruises or other kinds of cruises. And so my niche was it was a prime opportunity as well. So it kind of fit both ways. Personal network wise, I have a network of travelers that have no interest in working with advisors.
Sure.
And you're never going to convince somebody to hand it over if they don't want to hand it over, right?
Right.
I also had a network of a lot of naysayers who told me that this industry was you doing, because I'm of the older millennials that we were always told that this was going to be an obsolete job, right? AI, online booking, whatever. And
well, all of us older
the
millennials at some point were like, this lonely planet is not all it's cracked up to be.
It is terrible, right? It
was
does
my
not.
journey.
It's so generic. And
it was like, if I walk into another recommended cafe full of American 21-year-olds,
exactly,
I'm going to freak out.
Exactly. Or going back to Google, what to do in Paris, 1,700,000,000 some odd results. Like, our job is to sort through all that, right? So as I'm being told no, I also knew, given what I had just found with what was available locally, that there was an opportunity there. And I needed to get in front of people that, A, I'd never networked with because I was new to the area. B, my network I did have was a bunch of naysayers or a bunch of people who wouldn't work with me anyways because they didn't believe in what we did. I have since proven them wrong. So for what that's worth. But it's also a way to, when you combine it with all the other opportunities out there to get in front of people, it was also free. And that was the biggest component of being a new business owner, is how to do this with the least amount of investment as possible.
That was not my experience. But it was a different type of approach.
Let's get into that, because I am so curious what you did. I have spent $0 on Google ever. I have spent precisely $20 on advertising ever in 7 years.
So, Lee, when you think about what you have invested, are you thinking about building a website, SEO experts, like this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it wasn't the Google. I also have not spent any money on having Google find me or on Google Ads. I have the same experience, but for me, it was I launched my product when I started my company was my website. It wasn't me as a travel advisor. And so I did make a very big investment right up front in the branding and in the website design and in the functionality. So like what I really wanted to build for my website was, I do like very detailed hotel profiles that can be filtered on a lot of different categories that families are looking for. So I couldn't just build a standard website. I built a custom website, and I worked with a great team to do it, but that was just a different type of investment, and not one that any travel advisor who's looking to, I think, use Google or blog content as the way to get business would have to make. That's different, right? That wasn't necessary, but it was part of what I did.
So Denise, when you think about it being very low cost or free to get started, did you build your own website? And how did you start? How did you build the foundation that when people were Googling in your area, that they were finding you?
So I have a background in tech. There were several years that I worked in an e-commerce environment as a product manager for our internal web system. So it gave me some insight on how to build something, and then peripherally what the importance of SEO was in people finding you online.
Mm-hmm.
I think 95% of the world's traffic uses Google to start with. So Google just seemed to make the most sense. So when starting out, I did build the website myself. I wrote a copy. I used a template. I used Wix,
Yeah.
drag and drop, and found pictures on free sites. Googled how do I find free images, and just kind of I winged it more or
Yep.
less. Um,
Yep.
but what I knew to be true at that point too was that in order to be found on Google, there were two things that I needed to do, and one was SEO, which is just basically being active on your site constantly, letting Google know you're still current, new content, it's still relevant, right? Like that's what you're telling Google
Mm-hmm.
with updating your website. The other thing was creating a Google My Business profile. And
Yep.
that um, where I personally found the most benefit. They've made it more complicated now with extra steps and extra verification processes, but it's still just as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest difference between what it was and what it is now is now it's definitely location based, whereas before it was just kind of business based.
Right.
Now it's maps, whereas before it was just your business listing.
Yeah. Do you know how that works now I mean,
Yeah.
the majority of us don't have a brick and mortar location. And I originally registered mine in California when I was there, and I haven't tried to move it to Iowa, but I've almost kind of avoided moving it because I've heard it has gotten so much more complicated. And if you don't have a physical street address to attach to it, does it not even let you, or it's just a lot more complicated?
They now require that you do business in person. So whether that is you going, like a mobile detailing, for example, is still a valuable business in an area because they go to you. Where they're located matters because then their service area is limited. So it's similar kind of thing where we have to have a service area that we go to them. And that is something that we commit to when we now create new business listings on Google.
And that makes sense for your business too. If you're trying to attract people in your local community to be their travel advisor, right? Then you do in some ways have your local area of business. And that's how Google can say, oh, people in this area, I don't actually know where you live. I realize as we're talking, people in this area are
Mhm.
looking for a travel advisor. Denise is the person whose website we should show them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But do you need a physical street address to tie to that, or can you specify an area? Like, could you say Greater San Francisco
So
as
both.
like an area?
You
Okay,
need to prove that you have a physical location, but you don't have to show that
Mm-hmm.
got it.
to,
Okay.
like, you have to prove it to Google to verify that you're legitimate.
Yep. 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 Yep.
But yeah, you don't have to show it to the public. You can still
Okay.
be a website only, meet in
Okay.
person, travel only location. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so when you were working on SEO for your website, were you primarily focusing on like the content of your website, or were you writing blogs, like actually producing content? Denise, sorry.
Oh no, that's all right. I was not focused as much on creating consistent content. Like I'm not a blogger, I'm not a writer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing was just constantly making updates to the website
Okay.
and like adding keywords and
Yep.
changing keywords and adding pages and deleting pages. And for me, that was one of the things that I did to just keep evolving. I've
Sure.
personally launched like 6 websites at this point
Mm-hmm.
for my business. Like I just completely redo them. Personally, I think it's fun, and I know that kills a lot of people, but that was one of the ways, the strategies that I did it was I'm still relevant because I have a completely new website,
Interesting.
Gotcha.
completely new copy, new design, new everything.
And so then,
Recently,
sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say recently I've been adding more content and blogs and seeing a, a bigger uptick
Really?
in results as yeah.
When you say a bigger uptick, is it a traffic or is it actual inquiries?
So
Both.
traffic is the first thing to measure. So that's a complicated question because there's so many things we can measure, right, Lee?
Yeah, I measure them
Yeah,
all.
we're measuring every. How do I answer this question? So what matters to me are a few different things. One is when you are Googling something, how far down the list of Google results do I show up?
Yes.
If you have to scroll, you're too far down.
Yep.
Period. People don't
Yep.
go past the first 2 or 3, right? So that's one of the things. That also then led to increased traffic to the website. So monitoring how many people are actually getting there, and then monitoring how many people, how long do they stay or do they leave right away.
Yep.
At that time, I was doing a terrible job of measuring like leads and tracking all of that stuff, but I was busy, so I was like, okay, I'm happy.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that
Sure.
was my version of measuring
Yeah.
success at that time.
So
Thanks,
as
Masters in
you
Travel. I now measure all my leads as well.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Whitney's spreadsheets
I,
are amazing. Yes. The whole grail of
I'm
spreadsheets. Yes.
I'm very happy to hear that those have been valuable for you and that you've also found value in that metric.
yeah.
Because it's like one of the number one things I look at.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because we're running things by ourselves. So I feel like things can get emotional sometimes of like, I haven't had a lead come in. And then you go back and you look at the numbers and you're like, we're fine. We're fine.
Yeah.
Like move on with the day, you know? Okay. So when you had your first clients coming in, Denise, were you immediately trying to point them back to leaving a Google review to kind of start that flywheel of not only the SEO and the traffic to your website, but then also just the
Social proof.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I got to like 20 reviews really, really quickly. And it just so happened that in my area, I was the only one with more than 5 and the only one with all 5 stars.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
just getting to 20 was like, oh, this is it. That set me apart from everybody else. It's not the case
Awesome.
anymore. Somebody came in and totally is kicking my butt with Google reviews now. But
What?
yeah, I know they have like
What's their
years
name?
thing.
I'm coming.
I know,
I'm just kidding.
I know. But I'm like, that's exciting because to me, that's also encouraging me to go and revamp my processes to try to get there again.
And
So
also it
I'm
shows
like,
potential clients that we are not dead. You actually have options.
yes, 100%, 100%. Yes.
Okay, this is fascinating. So Lee, let's go back to you building a website to not be a travel advisor. What were your metrics of success early on in the beginning, like before the trip design part
Yeah.
started?
Traffic was really the big one, and I've been tracking my traffic like quite diligently since I started. And partly that's because what I did first when I started was I learned from travel bloggers. So I took a travel blogging course. I was dancing around, right? Am I a blogger? Am I a travel advisor? Like, what's
Yep.
the business here? And it turns out like I'm in some ways a little bit of both. So I started tracking growth for how many users I was getting per month and page views per month. And I was tracking my domain authority, which I don't know if that's like a term you guys are, and Denise is, and of like how the strength of my website, which helped to improve where you could rank on Google. So I spent a lot of time getting backlinks to my website,
Yep.
trying to do all the things that you do, right, to build up your ability to rank on the first page. So I tracked that growth as well. So I'm looking at my spreadsheet now. Those were like the things I tracked from the very beginning.
And so you said that when you started it, you didn't know how you were going to monetize it. So how did monetization start for you?
It start by becoming a travel advisor.
Yeah.
So, actually, though, that is the first way.
Because I mean, most bloggers, unless they're an influencer, like true, like classic 2005 bloggers, are like it's mostly ads, right?
So I just started running ads this year. So it's
Okay.
ads and it's affiliate links. It's links to Expedia and Booking. And I've had a very uh, contrasting aspects of my business, and this is something I've really struggled with, which is a lot of travel bloggers link you out to book your hotels on Expedia because that's one of the ways that they get commission to make money. I don't think that people should book hotels on Expedia for all of the reasons that we know. So I didn't want to
Yes.
do that. And
Yes.
so that removed for me, and I've toyed with it off and on, but that removes from me an avenue of monetization that is available to a lot of travel bloggers. And I've had to kind of think through that carefully in a lot of different ways. So because I do all these detailed hotel profiles, one of the things I offered from the beginning was that people could book through me. And that way, that sort of was my like toe dip into travel advisor land. And so I still get a big chunk of my business is people that I'm not their advisor. They don't pay me a fee. They find a hotel on the website, they book it through me.
So, what do you think is their motivation to email you to ask to book a hotel as opposed to just going and doing it themselves?
Yep. Some of it is the perks. So I have to sort of like put for the hotels that are luxury hotels, I do say, I include like the virtuoso perks that we can get people. And I have some language some copy that I thought very carefully about and edit a lot about just that we'll go the extra way to try to VIP, right? Like we'll arrange we'll arrange the transfer. We try to make sure our guests have the best experience. We have relationships with these hotels. I send a lot of clients back to some of the same hotels that I've listed on my
Right.
website. And I do have relationships with those hotels, even if they're not a hotel that offers guaranteed perks.
Right.
And I still think about how to as I send more and more business to specific hotels, how to maybe go back to them and say, look, can we start offering Mango Tree clients something extra? Mr. and Mrs. Smith.com did that for a long time, where it's like you get a free bottle of wine if you book through Mango Tree. That's all people need. If it's the same price, but I can get a free
Yeah.
bottle of wine
Yeah.
or a free massage, why wouldn't I book through this
Sure.
person? And so, but that's been a challenge when you think about like the challenge of that has been sort of why should people book through me? And so that definitely is a
It
dance for sure.
Yeah, and that this was kind of my next question of like what has been the greatest challenge in building a business in this way. And I think that when people are coming to you and the first interaction is we've gone through your entire website, we've chosen the hotel that we want, we just want you to book it. It is a more transactional
Yeah.
relationship
Yep.
as
And
opposed
yeah.
to let's get to know each other, where do you want to go, and then like a week or two later we're ready to book the hotel.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm not wild about that part of the business a lot of the time, but it's been successful and it requires a quick turnaround because when people want to book, they want to book right then.
Yes. Yes.
So it requires very quick responses. I think that my past career as a lawyer has like helped me with that because I'm just sort of used to living in a fast-paced email environment, so I don't
Sure.
mind that. But it also, when I was thinking about your question on biggest challenges, for me, it's the dead leads. When I look at the number of leads I get into my website and the conversion, I spend a lot of time sifting through leads that don't go anywhere. But I've
So
thought
it's
about that as like a cost, right? Like instead of going out to networking events,
right.
in some ways, that's where I spend my time sort of like weeding through a lot of that.
So it's people reaching out, expressing interest, but then they don't move forward
Yeah.
or to
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And have you been able to identify or hone in on what the friction is?
Sometimes I think it's speed of how quickly can you respond. Sometimes I think it's people like I could think of your shopping habits, like you're laying in bed at night, you're doing some research, you happen to get to a website that says book this through us and we'll get you something. So you just send in the form, and then by the next day you've decided to go somewhere else, right? Like some of it's just people reach out when they're not yet ready to purchase.
Sure.
And so I think it's a few different things. Occasionally I get an email asking if I can get people a better deal. Oh, I thought this was a website that got good deals. I'm like, you obviously haven't actually read anything on my website because I'm
Yeah.
pretty clear. I spent a lot of time refining the forms, like
Yeah.
our complimentary booking forms. I get quite a few inquiries. This has become more interesting to me. People who use my complimentary booking form to ask my advice about where to go and then end up funneled over to the travel services, like the actual planning services, because you actually want advice. You don't just want to book a hotel. So I don't know. It kind of the different interactions of how people reach out has been one of the biggest challenges for me, for sure, and a big part of figuring out like how the business is going to work and what I how to do it in a way that I like.
Right. So where are you today? Do you want to continue both the hotel only booking that's a little bit more transactional and the trip design, and it's more of just communicating and make sure that all of the clients are getting in the right funnel or getting in the right workflow, I guess, and or are you starting to lean toward one or the other?
No, I think I'd like to hire. I mean, I've hired somebody, but I envision now having a full-time person at some point in the not too distant future who is primarily handling all the hotel bookings, because it's worth it, right? Like you
Yeah.
get, I mean, it's just, even if it's not a lot of bookings, like I do at least 1 or 2 a week, and that pays for the person who is handling the booking. And also these clients end up coming back. Like it's a little bit of a what's the lead magnet, but not lead magnet, the
Like a funnel or like
yeah,
a
yeah, or just the like loss leader.
sure, sure,
A little
sure.
bit is that I do get a lot of like, thank you so much for this website. Like this made our search process like so much easier. We booked this hotel and like we can't wait to plan future trips with you. They often end up on my email list. And then as I start expanding beyond the
Perfect.
Caribbean. So
Nurture. I think
I
it's
think
the
it's worth it.
nurturing
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
clients that like maybe they come in a way that feels super transactional, but if you're able to nurture them into more of an advisory role moving forward, or if they remain transactional but they're repeat and they're
Yeah.
enjoying your service, then that's also cool.
Because some of them are people who realize that when you're booking a luxury property, we get you these benefits. And so now I'm going to book their 3-day weekends here, their 3-day weekends there. And that, you know, that doesn't take very much time, especially if I end up getting help. Right now, it takes up way too much of my time.
Right. Right.
But that's just business management, right? But I think it's worth
Okay.
it. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
Okay, Denise, I'm curious to know for you what comes top of mind when you think about a challenge that you faced since trying to build your business in this way.
I think it's creating that content that's constantly refreshing is my personal challenge. Moving forward, I feel like AI is really going to be my best friend here. Utilizing services that are out there to write content for you is going to be one of the ways to attack this. But creating blogs, creating constantly updating content, and that kind of thing. It's really truly a job in itself.
It
Um,
is.
and
Yeah.
I feel like because it's not where my initial passion lies, it's a time suck because I'm trying to learn that now. I'm trying to figure out
Okay.
how to do that while executing it at the same time to improve
So
what
when
I'm doing.
so you didn't start like that and you said that that's not your area of expertise, that's not your interest. So like when did that shift start to come for you that you decided maybe I do need to lean into this a little bit?
During COVID, when things were a little quieter and I was looking for something to do, that was sort of like the starting point. And then coming out of COVID, the traffic was not what it had been pre-COVID. And
Okay.
so seeing that I needed to get traffic back up, it's like, let's look at some other strategies and ways to do this. So it is definitely a long game. It's not something that you write a blog today and you're good for the next
Right.
month. Like it's an ongoing, continuous process. And so trying to figure that out, but learn how to do it. I think some of the other things that really make a difference that aren't so obvious when it comes to working with Google and working on your website, what you name your photos when you upload them
Yeah.
to
Yep.
your website. You know, like
Yep.
those need to be keywords. It can't be the
Yep.
unslash, you know,
Hmm.
give credit to what's his name. Like, no, you have to, this is a
Or
couple
just
on the beach.
image 3625, like
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
like something like that. So that's been another thing of just trying to go back and learn a lot of that to figure out what do I need to do to update it. So it
Hmm.
is a time suck. That is the biggest challenge is taking the time to actually do it.
So it's really interesting that both of like the Denise, your challenge is more, it feels tech related or kind of content
It's
related
where
or
my mind goes, I think.
having to wear all the hats, I suppose. Cause I also built my first website on Wix and figured out that I needed to name my image files a certain way. Like I also kind of did all this at the beginning by myself, but I don't currently do it anymore, but that's because my business isn't relying on Google. So I was able to kind of be like, we're good here. I'm sure that if you Google index my website, it's a crapshoot. Like it's not a good situation. But it's interesting to me that you mentioned a challenge more like tech related, because as an outsider, when I think of people building a business on either social media or website, Google, SEO, whatever, I think about the hurdle of working constantly with people who you have no connection to, like none.
That's my preference. I love it. I love building that connection, like figuring out what makes you, like how identifying what that connection is. I know I'm not for everybody. I get that. And so like getting somebody on the phone and getting to a place where we connect on something. I learn about them. I'm genuinely interested. I've never met a stranger. These are all things that really make a difference to being able to talk.
Everyone is a stranger to me. Like that is like such a sign of our personalities. Like you're a stranger, you're probably going to stay a stranger.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people like that for sure.
Yeah, I'm so introverted. I will walk into a party knowing 0 people and I will leave knowing 1.
I think it's so interesting to hear you say all this too, because for me, I keep thinking lately, like my travel advisor business is getting in the way of the business I actually want to be running. And so I have a lot of I have to remind, like, I love the Google stuff and the blog writing and learning all of that and the marketing. Like, I love the website. And I find that right now I don't have time to spend on it because I'm planning so many trips. And that I feel is really frustrating to me. And I've on a lot of like podcast episodes, Whitney, one of the themes I remember noticing was like when we talk about like CEO day or the need to find time to not work in your business, but work on it. I'm like, I will ignore booking that airport transfer for 5 days and like write a blog post over here. And so like I
Say
have
the last 5 seconds again on CEO days.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I will spend all day long thinking about like the website and the SEO and the blog posts and all the other big ideas and like delay booking those airport transfers like as long as possible. And it's a continual reminder for me that like where my interest lies is partly in being a travel advisor and partly in this whole other thing. And you had a great episode recently about somebody who had an employee model for their trip designers. And I right away was like, that's me. Like and you start to see these things unfold as like, perhaps I need to have some other
Brianna
people.
and Erica, I think you're referring to.
Yeah. It was so good because I thought about, oh, maybe that's the answer for me. But it's anyway.
I think that's really important to understand and realize about yourself, and then B, don't fight that. Like on my CEO days, so booking transfers and flights and stuff should not be a CEO day thing. That's an in your business thing. But on my CEO days, I'm digging into the numbers. I'm digging into the analytics and I'm creating spreadsheets or I am doing something more creative that feels like I have a new idea. Like that's actually my problem. I constantly have new ideas and need to like stomp them down, like sit down. So I think paying attention to where your mind goes when you have space and when you're not in the nitty-gritty tasks of booking airport transfers is really important, and then lean into that.
Yeah.
So how can you, if travel advising is getting in the way of what you really want to do,
it is and it isn't, right? Like I can't remember who was on recently. It may have been Maddie who was on recently talking about how she on her team. I listened to every episode clearly, right? Like
that's great.
That's good. I also, by the way, told myself that I would make it as a travel advisor when I got to be on Masters. You should know. I'm like fangirl over here.
This is a big day.
I did brush my hair. Sorry.
Oh, I'm super happy for you. You've made it.
Thank you.
You're basically a celebrity now.
That's great.
Oh my gosh.
But I love the sales call. I'm like you, Denise. I could be friends with, I'm friends with everyone. I actually love the sales, like the initial discovery calls. I love the process of helping families figure out where to go. I do love big parts of the travel.
So that is an advisory role.
Yes, it is. I think
what I'm hearing as an outsider is that like you like engaging with people, advising them, helping, put all the puzzle pieces together. But that when it comes to the nitty gritty, copy pasting their credit card into a transfer website, you can hire people to do that.
Exactly.
I've actually had a really big realization, which is so simple and silly. I shouldn't admit this, but DMCs always talk about how they have booking teams. So you're always talking with like the travel designer and then the people who actually like book the ferries, book the tickets, book the inner island flights, all that kind of stuff. It's not the travel designer that you're talking to. It always is a separate team. And I knew this in the back of my mind for years, but it has only crossed my mind recently to be like, why don't travel advisors operate this way? Why don't I have a booking person? Because I have found myself recently, basically, as soon as I delegate one thing, the next thing that I'm like doing, and if it takes me longer than like 5 minutes, I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't need to be doing this. And recently it was like 65 Black Lane transfers.
Yeah. I think we should all have
why am I doing
teams.
this?
We should share a booking team if we can't hire one on our own to have somebody learn how to do all of this. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think understanding, like first being introspective enough to realize what am I really good at and what do I really enjoy? And then what am I doing that does not fill my cup at all? And it's not only about delegating and getting it off your plate to save time or be more efficient. It's also delegating and getting it off your plate to create more space to do what you love.
Yeah.
Because your business will likely thrive. The more time you can spend doing what you're really good at and what you really enjoy, your business will thrive.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I think it's a really important realization.
I think it's interesting, Denise, that like doing like the Google stuff and the tech stuff isn't where you naturally are drawn to, yet you've used it as a tool to really grow a business.
It's my default setting, but it's not what fills me. It's not what fills my cup at all.
So what fills your cup, Denise?
I love the front end portion. I love getting to know the people. I read people really well. So like understanding what they're saying without actually saying it, interpreting their silence. It's a thing that I am naturally inclined to do and do well. And when I can then turn that into a trip that I can visualize that they are seeing in their minds, that's the part that really brings me joy. From there, I don't want to handle it. The other thing that I really love doing is
there's like a common theme here. Okay,
yeah.
like you little minions back here. I don't know who you are yet, but like just go do this.
Right.
Help do this, please.
Yeah. And I think the other part of it is that I really, when you talk about CEO days, those are my favorite days. I love building the business. I love working on it and developing systems and finding solutions, and I love exploring the new tech that's been available and that kind of thing. Like these are all things that really make me excited. And where I find that I struggle or where I get the most burnout is when there is this inefficient thing that I cannot offload. And by the very nature of what we do, it's inefficient.
It's a lot.
It's taking a million things, a million bits of information and turning it into a digestible piece of info for a particular client, right? So it's just by nature of what it is, and trying to find a way to do that doesn't feel monotonous to me is the part that I struggle with the most and what contributes to burnout. But I find happiness in talking to the people to get to that point, to get to understanding what they really need, what they really want.
So I don't know how you'll answer my next question, because I think that we have such different perspectives. When I think about building a business on Google with websites or on social media, that means all my discovery calls are with people who I'm not even connected to within like 3 degrees. Like that sounds terrible to me. And you're both like, we're cool here. This is great. Yeah. I mean, literally anytime I tell my husband I have a discovery call, he's like, who are they? And I'm like, oh, they're friends of so-and-so, or a referral from this one, or referral. And like, I like going into a conversation knowing that there's already some connection, even if it's distance.
Yeah.
When they're like, somebody recommended you at work, I'm like, who are they? Where do you work? Like, like give me something to work off. And when I have nothing, I actually feel a little bit uncomfortable, or just like a little bit like, so on the flip side, we are all surrounded by so many advisors with different business models and different approaches to building their business. Has there ever been a time in which, you're in the discussion with other travel advisors, they're sharing their experiences, advantages and disadvantages, and you've actually thought, oh, I feel like I have an advantage here that I built my business in this way and that I didn't build my business, in other ways that travel advisors, and that you've actually felt that there are parts of the way that you've built your business that might be easier compared to other advisors. Have you ever had these types of thoughts? I'm curious to know more.
I would love to hear what Lee has to say on this because she's got a completely unique
No, because
launch from the beginning. Yes.
Still an imposter. Still have a big imposter syndrome complex over here. Yeah, I do think I've reached a point with my business where I don't worry about new leads coming in. I'm like, if I need a new lead, it's just gonna I get a new lead every day. Like that's just what happens. And like
And that's like the function of Google and websites and
you know,
SEO and all your content. Like
and
that
like it
is
took me 2 years to get to that place, but now I have this website that like and one thing we haven't talked about as much too is like people find Denise, find you when they're searching for a travel advisor. I think based on what you've described, people find me. I'm the back end on the blogs, right? So like my best performing blog is 21 best Caribbean islands for families, right? Like people are searching for something very specific and then they find
yes.
my niche to help them provide that. And because I've learned how to do it, I also know that when I'm expanding this year to Belize and Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and then I'm going to start to do Europe next year, that I know how to build this in a way where I'm going to then find the people who are looking for that. So I feel really confident in my ability, if I can find the time to do it, to expand to those destinations, which I think it can be a struggle for a lot of other advisors. And the thought of like new leads coming in, and I don't know, I think it's
that's so interesting.
approach,
So when
you know?
you think of expansion, you're thinking of like, I need these new hotel profiles on my website. I need the SEO in the background. I need this new content in my
Mm-hmm.
blogs so
Yep.
that when people are searching family friendly Costa Rica, that they land on you.
Yep.
And when I think of expansion, I'm thinking like, I got to find time to leave home and to book a flight and then to go and then remember to post on Instagram about it and then hope that something happens.
Yeah.
And
But
we all
I
know I
like,
don't post on Instagram, so then nothing happens.
except about Ireland.
Except about, well, that's because I wasn't in charge of that. That's why that happened. That was a social media manager just being like, give me your phone.
But yeah, but it can be overwhelming. And that's, part of this is that like the growth for me looks a lot like creating a lot more content. Like I have just like endless content in my brain that I can't get onto the website. But I know I could, when I do it, I now am confident that like the travel advisor piece
It's
will come along with it.
fascinating because increasing, like not having enough leads coming in or wanting to increase not only the number, but also the quality of leads coming in is a really big challenge that a lot of advisors share. And for you, you're like, I have a new lead coming in every day.
Yeah, it's just fine tuning how to manage them the best way and get
Now you might not have as high of a conversion rate,
right. I
but
definitely
you
don't.
have but you have such a big volume that that's actually okay, and that your conversion shouldn't be compared to my conversion. It's not apples to apples whatsoever.
Right.
So interesting. Okay, Denise, what has crossed your mind just in listening to different advisors with different business models of like, oh, the way I've done this on my side actually potentially feels a little easier.
I think because I am online, I really truly get that remote work. I'm not committed to a particular region or area. And I think from starting out that way to evolving into not, I don't I don't focus on serving people in just where I launched the business. I think that that's a benefit because it's really hard to find a US agency that isn't a chain, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
so I think what that does is it gives me an opportunity to grow a team of independent people under the brand. And I think as a result of having that ability to be found in various places, not necessarily because of content, but more so because of the other things that contribute to being found on Google. I'm not limited to my area. I'm not geographically limited. I'm not limited to to a particular advisor because there's other ones that can come in. It's now the group of clients that I want to get in front of is bigger
Sure.
because it's not limited. And I
Right.
think that that's just one of the perks of knowing how to work with Google and being able to launch and do that is the business is there because it's not limited to how
You're
much
not
time.
limited to who you could potentially run into at a local Orange Theory or country club.
there's also
Right.
not a preconceived notion that, oh, you were a bartender, so I don't need to take you seriously, right? There's always that sort of step when you get into a new career. Are people going to take you seriously? Because you don't know me in any other position,
Hmm.
Mhm.
there's already a sense of credibility that I have as a professional because I've put that out there in that way. So I'm not having to overcome that objection of,
That
oh,
is indeed right. That is indeed a challenge for people who really want to build it on their own personal network if
yes.
they don't have a previous career. Like if you're transitioning out of law or medicine or some sort of like professional career, people are already taking you seriously. But for me, it wasn't. And so I actually, my first clients couldn't or wouldn't be like my friends and family, like within 1 degree. They all had to be, they were all people
Hmm.
within like 2 degrees, um, who weren't thinking of me as like a 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
really
so that was
interesting.
actually a hurdle that I had to kind of like, I had to actually put on events to get people in the room who didn't know me but who could at least get in the room because they were within 2 or 3 degrees of me to then get my flywheel kind of started. It did not start with like my aunt and uncle and, you know, it didn't start like that because they don't see you as a business owner. I think you bring up a really good point.
I
Um,
think it's also too, thinking about what's different from us as other travel advisors. I mean, you need reviews and you need people to vouch for you to show that you've got that expertise. I established my expertise by putting out like really good content about the destinations that I loved and wanted to plan trips to. And so by the time I get on the phone with somebody, like they think I mean I am an expert, but they know I'm an expert because they've seen all that content out there that
yeah.
I've put out there and don't have to
Sell
uh
yourself. You don't have
yeah,
to
as
prove
much,
anything.
right? Because it's like, well, my like you've seen the travel guides I put out there and like the energy I bring to the table. And so that I hadn't really thought about that until you were just speaking.
Yeah, I had to prove myself a whole lot more at the very beginning. And I didn't always succeed, to be
Yeah.
honest. That was a really big hurdle and a challenge for me at the beginning. Is that it took a lot of practice to like get on discovery calls and really be able to speak confidently, not just like present myself confidently, but then also about the destination and about their trip and about and like it was a lot that I did not always succeed.
Mhm.
And so that I think is your content leads the way for you. And
Yeah.
Denise, like your previous life doesn't it's not even a previous life. I was
Yeah.
also a bartender. Like it's just like your previous experiences or what someone might think of you or have an impression about you. That doesn't get in the way because they truly don't know you in any other capacity.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, there's also the tech background that informs my ability to work on the website side of things. So again, nobody has any kind of, they're not questioning my ability to bring that to the table at all. So
Right. Right.
and you don't have, like you said, you don't have to prove yourself. I hate that more than anything.
Mhm.
Like, you either believe me or you don't. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that I know what I'm
Nobody's
doing.
forcing you to be on this call.
Yeah, like, well, why should I work with you? Well, why do you want to work with me? Like, let's
Yeah.
talk about that. Like,
Why did you reach out and schedule
right,
a call and
right. Yeah, like I'm not trying to sales give me the ick, right? I'm in service business. So instead I want to, talk with people about how we can serve them, how we can create
Hmm.
these amazing things. And
so I'm curious to know from both of you, if there is an advisor listening who is getting their business started and considering all of the options of like, okay, there's a variety of ways I can go to start this business, to build this business. What have you learned? What have you both learned along the way that you can share? And what insights might you share with someone who is kind of you both back at the beginning of it's going to be Google, it's going to be my website, it's going to be SEO, it's not going to be my personal network, it's not going to be Instagram or any other sort of strategy to build this business, like this is the route that we're going. What insight or guidance might you share with them?
I have one thing they can ask themselves to help them decide which way to go.
Okay.
Can they get business without a website? If they can plan a trip without ever even creating a website, without ever doing anything except maybe emailing their friends or their network saying, "Hey, I've started this business." If they can get clients that way, then they already have a built-in trusted network that can then be built on repeats and referrals.
Then do that.
Do
Yeah.
that. Take
Lean
advantage
into
of that,
that.
because Google will always be there. Your network is a great place to start. That's they've already found you. It's the same as somebody already finding you on Google, self-evaluating, qualifying, and submitting a lead to you. At that point, your network is already that person.
That's such a really good point that
Hmm.
Google will always be there, because now I'm 8 years in and I'm wanting to expand my reach a little bit. So I believe that I've gotten as far as I've gotten with repeat and referral, but the growth that I would like to see over the next few years, I don't think repeat and referral is going to be enough. So now I'm coming back around to consider the Google strategies.
Interesting. I'm having the
That's
Yeah.
opposite. I'm thinking
such
about
a
doing
good
like
point.
more in-person networking.
That's
um,
yeah. Okay, what insights might you share, Lee?
mine would be that if blogging, like content marketing, like the kind of constant creation of content is something that people are thinking about, that you have to really like it.
Yes. Oh
Because
my
it takes
God,
a
I hate
lot
it.
of time, and I love it, as it turns
Yep.
out, because and it takes a lot of patience. So it took me, I mean, my traffic has gone up a lot, but it took me almost a year and a half to hit my first big traffic goal, which was like a specific one I had based on wanting to start running ads on my website.
Okay.
And it took me a long time to hit it. Like it just takes a long time for your website to grow, and there's a ton to learn. And so if you're into it, like I was super into it, and I loved learning about it and still love doing it. And so that's been a great thing for me. But if you don't, this would be a nightmare if it
Yeah.
wasn't an enjoyable process
Yeah.
for whoever's trying to do
Mhm.
it.
I think that's great advice. I think you do have to be really honest with yourself. I'm really honest with myself about how introverted I am. And that is part of my DNA. And I'm not going to be able to change that to grow a business. I also tried writing blogs, and I did write a few blogs. There are a couple blogs that are 6 years old on my website, but I hated every moment of it. It was one of those things that would be on my to-do list for like 6 months. And then eventually I'd just be like, I'm never going to do this. Like write a blog about X, whatever. So I think it's really great advice and suggestions to like just be honest with what you enjoy and with what
Mhm.
you're good at, and lean into that and find ways to either offload or delegate or not do some of the other things that you don't enjoy, because that's what's going to suck the life out of you.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Amazing. Lee and Denise, thank you both so much just for sharing your journey and giving us a peek behind the scenes. I love that you're both growing your business in similar ways, yet you have such vastly different experiences and stories. So it was really fun to learn about both. Thank you both for your time.
Thanks,
Thank
Whitney.
you. This was great. It was so fun.